We'll be starting shortly. I'm just waiting for some folks to come into the meeting, but we are live now on YouTube. So, thanks. We've got a few more joining us, and I'm going to turn it over here just a few minutes. We are live, but just letting people know that we are getting the meeting going. We're getting some people into the meeting, and we'll be ready to go here in just a moment. Okay, everybody, good afternoon. Good to see you. We may have a couple other people that straggle in in a few minutes or so, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Vaughn and Bridget down at Benchmark. I know that they are sharing their screen currently, and you should be able to see our comprehensive plan screen splashed up there. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll turn it over to Vaughn.
Thanks, Matthew. So does everybody see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for joining us this afternoon for our steering committee meeting. We've been very busy since the last time that we've met and wanted to share that with you along with some other. There it is. All right. So the agenda for today's meeting, we're going to talk about our community conversations that we had earlier this month. We're going to give you a little bit of an update on public engagement and talk about our future meetings, specifically about a steering committee visioning session that we hope to hold next. So from August 8th to 13th, the 8th was a Saturday. Beginning that day, we held 4 different days of community conversations with residents of Jamestown and CTJ, as well as a few folks from outside of town. We did in-person sessions at Jamestown Town Hall, sometimes 2 groups going on at one time, one in the council chambers, one over in the Civic Center on the 8th and the 12th. And then on the 11th and 13th, we invited people to join us online in meetings like these. We did small groups, especially in person, maximum of 6 participants. We also wanted to keep it small so that people had an opportunity to participate in the conversation, let their voices be heard as part of this process. Overall, we had 55 meeting participants. We had 52 people, I think, register through the RSVP. We also had a few people just kind of show up, especially in the in-person meetings, which was fine. We did not exceed our limits at any time, so that was good, and it was good to have as many people as we did. So again, the majority of the people that did participate do live in the town limits. The overwhelming majority of the remainder are people who lived in the ETJ, and then we also had a few members of the Guilford County Sheriff's Department join us to participate in the process, as well as maybe 3 or 4 folks that live outside of town, but immediately adjacent to Jamestown and have concerns or interests in what's going on in the community as well. We did hour-long facilitated discussions. We began each one with an introduction about what the comprehensive plan was intended to do. We asked everybody if they had viewed the videos. The majority of the folks that participated had gone online as the invitations asked and looked at those videos, so they were pretty well informed about what was going on and what work had been completed to date. So after our little introductions, we went around the room and everybody let us know who they were and how long they'd been around Jamestown and what their interests were. And then we basically kicked it off with a question about everybody's vision for the future of Jamestown, and got a lot of differences of opinion, not in exactly where the town ends up, but maybe how to get there in the future. We talked about a wide range of topics. We had some kind of pre-prepared questions that we used to stimulate conversation as it lulled, as it sometimes does. Some groups were a lot livelier than others and had a lot more to say, didn't have to pull as much out of them, but it was really great getting to meet everyone that came and participated in those conversations. So we sent out, I think, about a 6-page summary of our kind of bottom line discussion results, the notes that we had taken during these meetings. So hopefully you've had a chance to review that. But kind of high level, top line, what we heard, and this is from these community conversations, were these 10 topics that we have up here, kind of the top 10. So of course, on the front of everybody's mind are a couple of big things: managing growth and concerns over the Johnson Farms planned unit development. In terms of managing growth, there was some diversity of opinion there in terms of, is it residential growth people concerned about? Is it commercial growth? Is it commercial growth that impacts the character of the town? People noted that, with regard to the bypass, they didn't want it to become Windover. things like, having developments out of character with the community was a common concern about managing that growth and how quickly it occurs. And that really spilled over. Johnson Farm was kind of the elephant in the room in every conversation. We didn't bring it up ourselves necessarily, but it brought itself up in each of the conversations, of course. Especially when we had ETJ residents in our sessions. I think we probably had somebody from ETJ and probably at least one person in each of the sessions, even though they weren't necessarily a majority of the people that participated, but there were concerns about how their views were being translated into policy in town and how they're represented in the community, and making sure that they felt like they were not necessarily appreciated, but they were involved and included in the decision-making process. They sometimes, what we heard from people was they sometimes didn't feel like they had a voice to the extent that they would like. Downtown, of course, this reflected a lot of similar themes with downtown we've heard from other folks. Parking being an issue, some vacant buildings being a potential issue, a desire to keep it, local businesses in the spaces there to maintain the character of downtown, making some aesthetic improvements, making sure it's safe for pedestrians. Aesthetics and the character of the community in general, people to a person were very complimentary of what they felt was Jamestown's historic character and the charm that it embodied through some of the development patterns and the quality of some of the residential development that's taken place in the community over the years. This goes everything from the houses that have been built to the businesses that have been built to trees, all the way down to the brick sidewalks and where they are and maybe where they aren't. Schools, certainly a concern about the degree of influence that the town itself has on the school system and its voice in ensuring that it has the resources, the infrastructure, the quality of educational opportunity for the children of Jamestown that they desire. Things like overcrowding, the composition of the districts, whether they were focused on Jamestown or bringing kids that were from out of town, or if kids from Jamestown were maybe would have to go somewhere else to get into schools that met the needs of the residents of the town. And then, of course, the impact on schools that any kind of large amount of new development might have in the future, and the responsiveness of the school board, the potential responsiveness of the school board to those needs. The environment, trees in particular, came up in a lot of our groups. Concerns about potential for clear cutting, the cutting that's gone on for the construction of the bypass was a concern among a lot of people. The potential cutting of trees, Johnson Farm, concern for wildlife and things of that nature in general, and making sure that an expression of wanting to have a verdant environment, a green environment in Jamestown. With regard to the bypass, one of the things that we kind of learned from some of our questions there was that a lot of people knew of it, but didn't really have a firm grasp of its need, what its purpose was, and what the effect on the community would be. And again, I mentioned earlier concerns that it would spur a great deal of growth along the corridor, and as people mentioned, not wanting it to turn into Wendover, which is a valid concern that I would have as well if I lived in the community. Historic preservation, making sure that those buildings, those sites are taken care of and passed down to future generations and really celebrated, maybe more than they are now. There's a lot of support for those sites that make Jamestown a unique place and reflect its history and some of the unique things that happened in Jamestown over the years, going back to things like Underground Railroad and the Jamestown Rifles and all of that, and wanting new development to also reflect and pay respect to that historic character. And then finally, everybody, I think we had a few people maybe walk there, and I know a couple rode on bikes. We didn't have a lot of folks walk to the meetings, but they all expressed the desire to be able to do so. And we had a lot of conversations about areas of the community that they felt might not be as safe for pedestrians, might not have the type of infrastructure that they would like to see, connections they desired to see from neighborhoods to places, particularly downtown, that they would like to be able to walk, and things like how the railroad impacts the ability of people to safely move between portions of town. So those were our top 10 issues there. And quickly before we talk about that, I just want to kind of a second slide here that compares that to, so we had different groups of people. So this was from our listening sessions and stakeholder meetings that we had at the very beginning of the process. These were people that were essentially chosen by us to come in because the staff and steering committee members felt they had a particular set of insights or knowledge about the community, expertise, what have you. And so these are the things that, if you recall, what we talked about with or the themes that emerged from those initial stakeholder meetings. And they're not really that different in a lot of ways, but what we have on what we gleaned from these direct community conversations with people that might not have been involved with any kind of planning process or a board or anything like that in Jamestown in the past. This is more reflective, I think, of a lot of the survey results that we got and things that people came up with as they were able to have a chance to engage with their neighbors, really maybe for the first time, meeting people they'd never met before in conversation about the future of the community. Interestingly, skipping ahead past that one now, we just wanted to kind of call out some of these ideas that we heard that we thought were maybe unique to the conversations and wanted to have available for you and maybe pass along to Matthew and the manager and to the council as you're looking forward. And some of the things are things that have been talked about, but these are just things we thought were kind of unique that people mentioned maybe once or twice or more. So one of the things that really stood out, one of these kind of unique issues, is very specific to the to that issue, is the having a senior center for residents of Jamestown. They're pointing out that such facilities are available in other communities in Guilford County, but as the population has been aging, they would a number of people expressed to us they would have a desire for more senior oriented programming, at least, and maybe a place that could be the point of service for doing that. Several groups or individuals brought up the library, utilizing it for more than it's being utilized for now. I don't know exactly what all is going on in there now. People's impression of it, though, was that there may be some other things that could be done, some other services that could be provided by the county, by other agencies, nonprofits, whomever, but utilizing that space to make better use of it. We got a semi-presentation by some bicycle advocates on, I think, Saturday morning, talking to us about the unique issues related to bicycling in Jamestown. That was an interesting conversation we had. Youth soccer came up, having a community accessible rubberized walking track for older folks whose knees might not enjoy walking on concrete or asphalt as much. That was an issue that a few folks brought up. Ghost tours, capitalizing on some of the nostalgia and urban legend of Jamestown. Interested, I hadn't really thought about this one, but the downtown trash pickup, and people made a comment to us that the timing of that pickup, doing it earlier in the day, would be better for the community because it would get it off the streets earlier in the morning before as many people came through town. I don't know about this one much. I don't know if the town used to do this or the county health department or whomever, but somebody brought up that they would really wish that Jamestown still sprayed for mosquitoes. Take that with a grain of salt, I guess, but it was important to that person. And I guess if I didn't have to deal with mosquitoes, I'd be pretty happy too. Coming kind of reflected from our surveys, some folks brought up the idea when we talked about GTCC is how getting them more integrated in the community, and kind of coupled with the senior center, having classes available actually in town for folks that want to go out there and deal with the parking situation out there to get into the big buildings. But integrating the town and the community college more through something like a class offering, be it general interest stuff or arts and crafts classes or anything of that nature. And then just in general, having more varied and more widely distributed areas for places for recreation in the community as well. And so those were some of the just kind of unique things we thought came out of this that we didn't really bring up on our own. These were really prompted by questions we asked or statements that we made to facilitate the discussion. These are things that kind of emerged organically during that process. So I'd like to go ahead and open it up to comments, be it about just this top 10 list, the process we used, the results, the summary with all the notes we took. Anybody have anything they'd like to share with us, ask, impressions, hear anything from participants, please?
This is Jane. I have a lot of questions.
Sure.
One of them is when they're talking about physical barrier of railroad tracks, and then they are also talking about the problem with trash on railroad cross areas. Did they give you specific spots of trash? Because the railroad is very particular about who comes on their property.
Sure.
So I'm trying to help here because I can contact them if there's a place that needs to be cleaned. Or Paul can.
So Bridget was just saying that that note was about the area around the bridge where they're doing the construction right now. I don't know if it's a recurring problem or what. I don't know if the bridge being narrow might trap trash in that area or something. I'm not sure. We're just, who knows?
Okay.
There's a note. So passing along. I don't know how the construction, I don't know if it was an impression from the construction that's been going on. Maybe that clearing vegetation has uncovered some trash or something out there. I don't know.
Well, people tend to be very messy when they come through here, and it's not necessarily citizens or people that even live nearby. It's just people that are passing through. They just can't seem to help it but throw their trash out. I've seen a lot lately, not in Jamestown specifically, but every time I go out, I see people just throwing trash out. It's ridiculous. I'll let somebody else ask a question, but I have some more.
Sure. Who's next? Martha?
Well, yeah, Vaughn, and I had several as well.
Go ahead. You go back and forth.
I went through the notes and the information which y'all gave me, and I really appreciate y'all doing these sessions. And I think you came up with a really great creative idea, much more creative than I was trying to come up with things out. I applaud you for your creativity. But the first part, the visions for Jamestown's future notes, one of the comments being better defined boundary, visual distinction between High Point and Greensboro. And even back when we first did the current comp plan, the scenic overlay was talked about, the gateways in the town, and to try to recreate the white fences, those gateways like we have on East Main Street. And that was said by some other folks too. So I thought that I could see that as distinction when you're coming to Jamestown. If you come in with those white fences, then you would know you've come into Jamestown.
Right.
I thought that was great. And then I like the more housing options, of course, for people to age in place, because a lot of that in our very first meetings, when, like you said, we could get together with the people who invited, and then it's come out of your listening sessions here as well, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And so I thought that was definitely a need. And then looking on to, and I'll stop whenever you want me to, but the community concerns, there was concern about, said there was an open field across a stoplight on Dillon Road in the bypass, and they were worried about a gas station maybe going there. Well, I expand that, which we've talked about too, on Harvey Road, because there is an exit going to be on Harvey Road off the bypass. And so that was a concern, how commercial development pressures may be there as well.
Right.
And I agree, we have a sign ordinance in Jamestown, which a lot of businesses think is really strict, but in dealing with the updates to this plan, that sign ordinance maybe needs to really be looked at again in terms of just not downtown, but in these areas where new development may happen. We already had, it's been a year ago maybe now, but some are concerned about billboards. Do we have a sufficient restrictions against billboards on what would be the new bypass, be it Dillon Road, be it Harvey Road? And I think you did check and see that we do, but definitely the signage, I think, needs to be special policies put into place because of the new development. And with we also have talked about for a while reducing or asking DOT again to reduce the speed limit on Main Street. Someone had talked about that, but I know in our subdivisions like original Forestdale where I live and Eddie Oakley lives, we have speeding problem. And at one point, this AARP age-friendly communities presentation, they talked about traffic calming strategies within subdivisions. And I'd like to see some policies for that, which would help our existing neighborhoods with speeding. Several comments made about wanting some of the storefronts in town to be filled and to keep with these small restaurants or independent. And I'd just like to say we have a new Chinese restaurant, New Garden, has opened up in the Forestdale Plaza. They've been open about a month. I just recently went. It was very good food. So there's a storefront that has got us a new restaurant in there.
Awesome.
Yes, it is awesome. I was very pleased with that. And then also, I just wanted to mention with the historical resources, certainly know Jane could talk a lot more than I could about historical factors, but there was a comment about the historic walking trail. And a long time ago, there was talk of having a self-guided tutorial that people could walk and have to all the different historic markers that we have. And you'd have the tutorial and the map itself either available at the town hall or the library. But of course, one of the things that has to be done for that is the sidewalk going down Oakdale Road. And that sidewalk hasn't happened yet. It was in the design phase when DOT had their budgetary problems. And if a project had not been approved, if it was in the design phase, it was put on hold. So Oakdale sidewalk will happen. I just don't know when. It's scheduled once they release that, restriction. I think it'd go on with the design and probably be approved. But even now they could probably take that a step further. We talked about having a paper map that you could put up, but now with you see how Zoom is used, and I guess there could be a video or a tutorial virtual someone could use to make that tour. And those were my biggest things, other than the talk about the rubber mat, walking mat track. I thought that was a good idea, maybe to go in the Johnson property instead of the baseball field, a walking track that could be used by elderly, but also families, people with strollers, by all kinds of people. And of course, you go back to the town also had talks when you talk about some kayaking and things for Deep River. We had the Deep River tour, Blue Water, if you would say, plan that's been in place. But again, that's with you've got property owners that you have to deal with and funding of that. But those were quickly my thoughts when I read all of your notes.
Can I go again, or does this somebody else?
It's all you.
This is Jane again. I got the impression from some of your notes that a lot of the people that live in this area do not know as much about the history of the area as a member of the Historic Society. I wish they did. There are a lot of books that have been written about this town and the people that helped start it. There, right now, Mendenhall is not open, but at some point, hopefully it will be open soon. But there are a lot of things that you can look at. I mean, there's an Oakdale cotton mill video. And also several years ago, we had a lot of presentations at the library, even though the sound in there sometimes is not that good because of the way the building is. But we did have a lot of history stuff, and I think they were attended well, but maybe we can start that again. It's when somebody crosses a railroad track, I know they're nervous about it, but there's nothing we can do about that. We just have to make it safe.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the railroad's done a good job with all the crossing lights and gates and everything. But, sometimes people don't, they don't pay attention when they're crossing, and they don't stop when they should.
Right.
And maybe we could have an Operation Lifesaver presentation and I'm sure, you know, those organizations would not have a problem doing a presentation, at least talk to people about the safe way to cross a railroad track.
Definitely.
And definitely not with a cart.
No, yeah, that could be problematic.
Yes. And let's see, you know, one thing people need to know too is that at some point on Scientific, you become High Point.
Sure.
And so we're not going to have you know, very much, we can tell High Point what the concerns are, but you know, Matthew can probably talk about that better, but and I don't know whether people know where our area stops.
Yeah, there people, you know, identified some things that weren't in Jamestown as being in Jamestown during some of these meetings. I think it's fairly common, especially on the High Point side of things, and I think probably getting more towards the Greensboro side of things now as well. As things are growing together, the distinction really, you know, I've done a lot of driving around there lately, and after, you know, knowing the area since the early 80s, you know, there's not as much kind of real distinction between one place and the other.
That's correct, yeah.
And that same would be true, Jane, for Penny Road. Just
Oh, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
is in Jamestown. Yeah.
I have a question though about the bridge crossing on Pennyburn over City Lake Park. Is that, I mean, I know City Lake Park is owned by High Point, but do they own the bridge over it, or is that, where does the road end for us?
Before the bridge, I believe Penny Road is a state road. Is that correct, Matthew?
Yeah, Penny Road is a state road, and our jurisdiction stops somewhat before the bridge on the Jamestown side of the lake.
Yeah.
Actually, it stops before you get to the little road that goes into City Lake Park down in there. That's
okay,
all
that makes
City
sense, because the sign down there for James Mendenhall stuff is down that way too.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that, you know, people were that brought that up were just saying it would be nice for the residents of Jamestown to be able to more easily access the trails out at the environmental center. And you know, it's not in town, but is there a way to work with our neighbors and for DOT to, you know, build something that would allow that that access? I think that was kind of the gist of them.
Right, and I heard some of those comments too as well, Vaughn. High Point, my understanding is High Point is voted on a bond issue for recreation, and one of the things that they're going to do is try to do a similar bridge to the one that we just finished on East Fork Road to finish that loop. I think people get very confused as to where jurisdictional boundaries start and stop.
Definitely.
And they think that sometimes that we can coerce High Point into doing this or DOT, and that doesn't really work that way. But it has been something that's been planned for a long, long time. And yes, we would also like to see that. Yep.
Great. All right. Sherry, I think I see you trying to talk, but your mic's muted.
Yes, there it is.
There you go.
Yeah, that got it. Several things that I marked, and then some responses to what some other people have said. And of course, number one is open spaces and trees. And I think that could connect to some other situations. You talked a little bit about sign ordinances. That could be done in the planning department. We could look at what some other towns this size have done recently, you know, what modern or up-to-date signage ordinances that they have. And that's something that we could seriously look at and make sure that there's not a visual pollution, what they call it. But also identifying Jamestown, we can have it, you talked about picket fences, but another thing that we tie together the trees and our vision of being green would be pick some kind of trees, dogwood, whatever, and have that kind of at each location. That's not that expensive. And some of them could be good for pollinators. Sherry talking again about trees, I know, but I've seen that done where that's it's visual and it's pretty, and you kind of know you're entering Jamestown when you see that repetition. Not too many, but just enough that it kind of floats through, that you see something common growing along in places where it could be. That's one thing. The other, for a walking tour, when the Cedarwood Garden Club welcomes new residents in Cedarwood, and we have a packet. And in that packet, we have something about the library, about Mendenhall, about some other things that we include in that packet. It would be really nice if we had some pamphlets with a walking tour. I don't know if someone has done this before, but I haven't seen it. But a pamphlet with a walking tour for us to distribute, but to have it down in town, the town hall, when new people come in to register for whatever they do when they're new down there, and that pamphlet, or have it available at the library, have it available at other where people could pick up a walking tour. You know, it's a kind of a touristy thing, which would be good though. And a video, if someone wants to, there's some grants out there, maybe we could apply for a grant. I don't know who could, but there are out there to have both a pamphlet and a video. And the video could be on the Jamestown site where they could go to historical things, and then maybe have like little places to see, or a map, at least a map on the site where they could go and see, oh, this is what I can see if I go to Jamestown, you know, someone from out of town. GTCC, that's been interesting to me because I hadn't thought about it before. They must have a link that we could connect together. You know, what if they had a senior center? What if there's a place they could do something like that?
Yeah, and somebody, when we were talking with folks about that, one of the people was a retired nurse, and she mentioned a geriatrics program that they had at GTCC that could be integrated with that. So actually some practical instruction could be integrated with the service provided to the community. So there's a lot of interesting ideas out there.
I think that would be a great connection and get them more involved in Jamestown. We talked about that before. Future development, vision for Jamestown's future. That's something we're dealing with right now in more than one venue, of course.
Right.
Greater voice for ETJ residents, better integration into the community, and being in the ETJ area. I think maybe a little more communication with that. We could try it, you know, and see. Maybe an article in the newspaper, just some way for people to say, hey, wait a minute, I do have representatives from the ETJ, and we are listened to. Because I think that with the town of Jamestown, the ETJs are listened to.
I think some of it's just, you know, confusion or unfamiliarity with the structure of local government. People coming from different places, or had lived in a town or a big city or out in the county somewhere, and are unfamiliar with who represents them and how they're represented and things like that. And so just having everyone being on the same page about that is an important step towards making sure people understand how things work.
Yes, I just talked to a real estate agent the other day who was asking about other situations, and she said something about ordinances or things like that, and she thought that we were underneath Guilford County, and I was really surprised.
Oh my gosh.
really surprised at that situation. So I had to do a little learning curve there with this person, and it was very positive.
Great.
So people don't know. So that would be a good way. I don't know what way other than more communication, that they do have a voice. And some of this comes back historically from when Cedarwood wanted to be annexed. I think it was 2009 through 2010. And So I think some of that feeling was there with some older residents who've been here a while. And new ones, I don't know, that's a good thing for us to look at, to make sure everybody's included. Other than that, I talked about the grant. Walking track, I don't know with DC if they could establish a walking track too, but also one maybe across on the Johnson property. I think this is very well done, very pleased with all of the comments. Protection of open spaces and trees, personally really like that. Specific standards, future development meets specific standards. I don't know how that can be enforced, but it was interesting that people had put it down. And great job. I'm glad as many people came as they could. I think the virus held some back, but great job with it. Thank you.
I have one other question.
Yes.
Or observation. The intersection at Guilford Road and East Main or West Main, however it becomes at that point, it becomes west, I guess. Also the one at Penny Road. Penny, I was surprised when I went up there yesterday that they actually put a turn lane there left, but we still have problems turning to the right on Penny Road off of West Main. And then at Guilford and Main, I think if we put I know some people mentioned that in here, but it's dangerous to cross where we have a button to push, but we don't, well, actually there's no button to push. There's one that has a button to push and it lets you, has a walk area. But the other on the other side, there is from Black Powder. If you're crossing back over from Black Powder on the right part, it doesn't. You can't cross safely. And that curve there, people just fly through there, and when they're coming up the curve.
I'd also like to comment on the. This is
I refuse to. If I can't find a parking space, I'm not going to walk over there because it's just too dangerous.
Definitely a concern. Catherine?
Yeah, I was just going to say regarding the lighting, like in town, I know that's come up before, but I just wanted to, but especially at that intersection, have almost hit people myself crossing who, just were in dark clothes and it's just really dim.
Yeah.
Good point.
Are there any other comments, observations, questions, etc.?
I have another question. This is Catherine again.
Yeah, go for it.
And this may be crazy. I feel like we talked about it though. After the bypass is open, what is the feasibility of Main Street being made to feel more like an actual main street and less like a thoroughfare?
Yeah,
is that like a crazy idea? Or?
No, I think it's a pretty great idea, and that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at, because the bypass, the models to justify its construction would remove significant amounts of traffic from Main Street. And if the models hold true, which I think they will, then there will be certainly opportunities to do a lot of things that could not be done with the volume of traffic it has to carry at peak hours right now.
Okay.
And so we will look and see what some of the potential opportunities are for that as part of this, but that's a very, very good observation.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I would say, Vaughn, that would be, us talking about getting the speed limit reduced, obviously would be. Number two, they were talking about the ped head for Black Powder.
Right.
Town, as well as I, being a member of the TAC, have talked to them about the other ped head to have there at the town hall side. And we've had several conversations with them. Of course, DOT has been having some, as you know, budgetary problems, but they're aware, and the town will continue to remind them that we're in need of that ped head there.
Definitely.
Right.
Anybody else?
I'd just like to make a comment as Jane about people talking about preserving buildings and condemnation and stuff. And we do have, we have lost some historic properties in this town, unfortunately. I know that I'm on the Historic Preservation Commission for the county. I'm Jamestown's representative.
Mhm.
And we are always trying to make people aware of what they need to do. However, even the Historic Preservation Commission for the county cannot stop a demolition.
Right.
And so we need to work with the legislature in getting that changed so we can make sure that, you know, if it needs to be demolished, that's one thing, but if there's a way to save it, you know, and people were talking about that here, you know, nobody wants a historic property or even a home that can be, you know, even a, you know, a home that was built 30 years ago, if somebody's not taking care of it. And the town's been trying to work with, I know, the Oakdale place.
Right.
But I mean, High Point right now is about, I mean, in a year, unless something happens, they're going to lose the Elihu Mendenhall home property. I mean, we saved it for a year, but that's, you know, I mean, the developer who buys the property could still tear it down and just pay the fine, which is not, I mean, that sort of defeats having the authority to allow a year to try to find somebody else to buy it or move the home. So I think, you know, I just wanted to bring that up too, because I had marked, I mean, we lost the Potter House, although some of the logs are in storage, I understand still. But, you know, we can't lose Mendenhall because that's got its own salvation, thank goodness, with Mary Elizabeth Ragsdale.
Yeah.
So,
Can I ask a question about a couple of properties here? One is there any scuttlebutt about the Armstrong house on Guilford College Road? Is there anybody that's got the ability, the land to receive that and to reestablish that someplace in Jamestown? I guess it would take a lot of money.
it would take a lot of money to move that facility, and I don't know the condition. It's not been deemed a historic property by law, but it is a historic building. And you know, I'd hate to see it get torn down, but you know, maybe we can get the developer to move it to the back of the property if he wants to.
Yeah, we'd have
As
to.
long as he doesn't tear it down.
I'm going to jump in real quick. The developer's been very open about the fact that they're willing to donate the house,
Yeah,
or the house and a piece of property to a qualifying nonprofit that would come in and within a certain amount of time, obviously, refurbish the home. So there is, I mean, they're offering it up. I don't think that they found a willing participant yet, Ed.
Okay.
it's just going to cost.
But they
cost
do
a
some
lot of
land
money.
as well as the building, huh? Okay. All right, thanks.
That's something maybe we could do to see if we can help find something.
Right, that's right. That would be a good project. I carried my paper out there when I was 12 years old to the sisters and collected my afternoon paper fee once a month there. So it was a great memory for me. And I think so many people love the outside of it.
Well, it is very nice outside. I don't know what it looks like inside.
And then one other question about the Oakdale Cotton Mill. And we're talking about preserving history. Is there anybody on tap that's interested in preserving the Oakdale Cotton Mill?
I know that there have been several developers that have done other mills that have said something to Benjamin Briggs, and they said something to me, but they didn't get any feedback, good feedback, or any feedback at all from the current owner.
Okay,
So that's been the problem that I have seen.
okay,
I'm not giving up on Oakdale,
okay.
but
Oh.
I do everything.
Jane, this is Martha. Can I ask Jane Payne a question?
Go for it.
Jane, do you know, as a historic society, have any ideas of anyone who could take the Armstrong house, has the ability to take it with a developer offering it and you know, refurbish it and maintain it?
I think that when they have an actual board meeting, they need to discuss that. I think that is on the agenda for them to do. Right now, I'm not aware of anybody that, they have not mentioned to me anybody that would be able to do that. I mean, I don't have room there. Most of us don't have room for it. But
Well, maybe the Jamestown Historic Society could not, but they may know of another nonprofit or another organization.
What would be the potential for us to be able to look at that as a senior center and maybe raising the money ourselves and make it a nonprofit senior center?
I guess it would depend on what it's like inside. I don't, I've seen senior centers be come out of an old building, but depends, I guess, on what condition it's in, and you not only would have to restore the building, but in order to get any grant money or anything, you'd have to probably preserve it, like it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good thing. Thank you for mentioning that.
That would have to be explored. I first blush at the idea. I can't see the town paying taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
I think that would have to be a nonprofit, some private nonprofit to do that. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, I can mention it to the Historic Society.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Good ideas. Good ideas.
All right. Unless there's anything else, we will leave it at that for the community conversations. We will certainly include all of this in our write-up of the plan and everything. And you have this information now in your hands, and anybody watching at home has a good summary of what we heard from the community, in addition to the survey and other feedback that we've gotten to this point. I can just remind everyone that on the website, we still have those 4 videos, including the survey results, up in this presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, a PDF of it will be on the committee presentation site on there as well. So moving on to the next order of business. All right, so here's what things are looking like now. We have some ideas, or an idea, about what to do next. One thing that we're going to do, we've been working on doing, is trying to hold a similar type of meeting that's just with downtown business and property owners. We haven't had any success in being able to set that up yet. We do have someone on our team, Hillary Greenberg, that did a previous downtown study, and she's updating some of her data, and has reached out to a few people, but we're trying to get something similar to our community conversations set up with at least a group or maybe multiple groups, or if it has to be individual phone calls, that's fine. With more downtown business property owners, we had a couple of downtown business owners in our community conversations. We've talked to some other folks involved with downtown business as well, but wanted to get them together as much as possible to kind of generate that same type of discussion among them. So we'll hopefully be doing that in the next 30 days or so. And then our team here at Benchmark spent some time brainstorming about where do we go from here in terms of community engagement. And I think the second item of business in terms of big public engagement that we were planning on doing was going to be a session focused on downtown and urban design type issues. We probably would have originally wanted to do that back in June or July. Of course, everything's been thrown off schedule. But since we still really can't get big groups of people together at one time in one place to do meetings, we thought that a good way to engage interested parties about downtown design issues, be they the buildings, be they the sites, be they the businesses, the mix of businesses that are there, be they pedestrian safety, be they parking, be they the roads, would be for us to host some downtown walking tours. I don't think we would be able to do as many of them as we did. And of course, we can't do that online necessarily, but we would be out of doors. We'd keep it to small groups, have the same kind of registration system. Probably do that on a Saturday and maybe the following Tuesday or Wednesday during the week. Maybe 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, or maybe 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, going in different directions, but at the same time. And that way our team could we could directly invite the folks that are already in business down there, as well as the community at large, to walk with us as we explore the issues that are affecting downtown Jamestown, and kind of have a 5-minute session to orient everybody before we kick off, and then get back and maybe spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes back at Ren Miller Park, or maybe in the Civic Center, depending on how chilly or rainy it might get by that time, and wrap up with a session, a small session of people to talk about the issues we observed and ideas about how to improve things. And that there's a lot of tangents with things like the bypass and removing traffic from downtown and improving the road and improving pedestrian safety and attracting new businesses and keeping the business mix how the town wants it to be. And just general design issues. If somebody were to come in and tear down some buildings, what comes back in its place, and what does that look like, and how does it interact with the rest of the town, and how do we identify properties that could be improved through some creative solutions to better integrate them into downtown, or make use of other underutilized sites that may still have something viable on them, but may need to be something different because we might not need as many banks as we once did. So that's our idea for our next public engagement exercise. Wanted to bring that up with you today. Talked with Matthew about it a little bit, maybe a week or two ago. And so just any thoughts, questions, concerns, other ideas about how we might engage in some downtown discussions with folks. We thought since downtown's there as a resource available at our fingertips, we could just get out on the sidewalks and talk to folks about what's going on.
I have a question, just real quick. Is 6 the most that we could do, like legally, or seems like we could do?
Yeah, sure. We could do more. Our concern with that, is just the number of people on the sidewalk at one place at any one time. People being able to hear and interact, because we're not going to necessarily have a stage at each location. We might need to we'd like to be as unobtrusive as possible in case business is going on. We don't want to take up parking spaces in anybody's parking lot or block an entrance to anything. And I guess we could probably consider maybe a couple more, but we would not want the group to be so large that we would potentially interfere with other things going on downtown, particularly on a Saturday when locals may be out going around and patronizing businesses that will hopefully be full of people by the time we get to do this.
I guess my first thought is, oh yeah, I want to do that. And I wonder if a lot of other people are going to do that, which would be great if they did.
What we can do is, set up the same thing with the RSVP. We can split ourselves up into, 2 groups at the same time. We can add, if we start the sessions, if we leave the late afternoon open, don't plan anything for it, we can add a session as we see interest building. So we have the ability to add on to that we're just kind of constrained a little bit by time now because it needs to be while weather is still fairly good. And I think October won't be hot, probably won't be cold. It might be a little rainy. If it's just drizzling, we'll go out and do it. If it's raining, we'll maybe reserve a weekend, 2 weekends away from it for, or days, 2 weeks away from makeup of that. But it'd be great to be able to invite everybody to come along at one time. I just think from the perspective, if there's traffic, being able to hear and be able to participate, having many more than 6 might be difficult.
I do like that idea, Vaughn. This is Martha again. But it made me think back, I hate to keep saying, well, we tried this before and it didn't work, but hey, you got to keep going.
Sure.
But it was the 1997 with the UDAT project, and we invited all of the property owners on Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, some were out of town. Their absentee owners were out of town.
Sure.
But certainly sent them all the information. And that's what we were trying to do, was to entice them, encourage them to fix up their properties along Main Street, especially the ones that were vacant, or even some they had businesses in them, but the storefronts were not. Mm-hmm. And had talks of the facade grants. And at the time we tried to set up maybe some low interest loans through the local banks for them. But sadly, none of those things did work out, but that doesn't mean it couldn't now. They're even with interest rates as low as they are for housing, maybe that's more of a possibility now than it was back in 1997. But the main point was to make contact with all those actual property owners, and maybe have better luck with enticing them to fix up the outside of the properties.
Yeah, and the main purpose of this would be to really interact with people, and people that like going downtown but have some special knowledge or concern about it, that can point out to us something that we might not know. And for us, when somebody says, well, why can't we do this here? Why doesn't somebody do that here? And we can take our expertise in understanding development and urban design issues and say, well, if you look at this, this is maybe why that won't work, but this is maybe something else that could work in its place. And here, let's, after we'll finish the tour, we'll go back and we'll talk about those things. And we can learn a lot, and the folks that join us can learn a lot, hopefully, and just incorporate that into the overall planning process. And it would be great to be able to reach absolutely everybody. We'll reach as many folks as we can. Yeah,
I think that's a great idea.
Me too.
And I'm like Catherine, I'd like to do it too.
Yeah. Well, we'll probably come up there for a dry run of it.
Other people before me.
Yeah, we'll be your guinea pig.
We'll probably come up there for a dry run. So if you see us walking around, come and join us.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello, this is Eddie.
Hey, Eddie.
We have a piece of property, the bank building on Main Street.
Yep.
Does anyone know if there's anything in the works to take the place of the bank that left?
I have not heard anything.
Neither. No.
Because that would not be an easy piece of property to move based on what it's designed for. And it really doesn't look good sitting there empty.
Yeah. Point well taken. Point well taken.
And what's the motivation for the bank to lease it to another bank, a competitor?
None.
We may need a change of use.
Yeah.
As one of our urban design folks here that works up in the DC area noted, is that his wife had been involved with Bank of America for a long time, still does work with big banks, that branch banks now are just about used for as signs.
Really?
Yeah, they build them And I see that in my neighborhood in Charlotte. Somebody building a fifth third bank where they absolutely do not need one. Not that it's a problem, I'm sure it'll look great, but there's no reason for the bank to be there. I mean, they're building them all over the place. There's one a block away from where I'm sitting right now, and I don't live far from my house. I mean, far from work. Yeah, but so yeah, banks are tough, and the up and comers are trying to get in everywhere so they can make their brand better known. Say we're in your community, and the ones that are consolidating are leaving behind real estate with no incentive, as you noted, to give it to anybody else, any competitors.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that will be good on your walking tour.
Yeah.
Eddie Oakley's point. What else could be used there? How could you change that use?
We've seen banks turn into various things from time to time. It's kind of awkward, especially when the way they're built. They tend to still look like what we could think of as a bank, but you can do something that brings vitality and business and commerce and provide services to the community for sure.
Yeah.
If there aren't any other points on that, we will.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Sherry.
When you have these small groups,
Yep.
Understand the process and the goal. So let me just separate both of those. You're going to give them any information about what you expect from them, or is it going to be just open, let's discuss things about the area? Are you going to point them in any direction? Are you going to have different things that you want to bring up?
We will have our own itinerary set up just so we know that it's not going to last too long. And then we will lead people to specific locations. We haven't gamed that all out yet because we didn't want to do it before we talk to you. But we will lead them to certain destinations and have things pre-prepared to talk about. And then we will, if people want to point out things along the way, they'll certainly be free to do so. But we will let people know, kind of like what we did with the community conversations, what their role is and what's expected of them when they go to register to do it.
Will they have this information? I know it's public information, but some of the things in this 6 packet might be good to know how the people feel, how the residents feel.
We'll probably come up with something that conveys information specifically about downtown, and we'll of course point people back to those videos we've made so far for the process, so that anybody who has not taken the opportunity to view those on the envisionjamestown.com website, remind them that those are available and ask them to do that before they join us, as well as making that other information that's specific to downtown available.
Because when we talked about signage and a way to identify the town, if they knew that was going to be on the agenda, they might say, oh, and do think about it and have some really good ideas of what they could put in front or go along with or be able to afford, or be willing to change.
Right.
Too.
And just another note on that. I noted on the PowerPoint slide there that, focus on the area from town hall to the library. So that's right at about a half a mile. So one mile out and back, probably take about an hour at least. That would be going pretty good. And nobody wanting to really engage us in a lot of conversation all along the way if we stopped at 4 or 5 places out and 4 or 5 places back. And then, probably, minimum of 20 minutes of walking in between. So I think we can certainly have a pretty robust walking tour there between those 2 different areas, and see a lot of different stuff that impacts the community, where places that people can help inspire us to come up with ideas for how we improve downtown Jamestown.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I do. I really like it.
I like it too.
Right. And maybe by the time we get around, hopefully, to adopting the plan, we can have an event downtown to celebrate the adoption of the plan.
I look forward to the day we can all be together. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for everything. This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So moving on. So our next meeting, we have not set a date. I don't think we have to set a date right now, but this is what we're going to be looking to you to help us with. First, maybe a bit of real homework. So we've gathered a lot of information and ideas and thoughts and concerns from the community over these past, well, stretching back to February now, really, with a little bit of interruption. And so and the purpose of some of these recent community conversations, those meetings when we're going to have the big meetings, was really to be working on a vision for Jamestown's future. Your current vision and your adopted comprehensive plan goes through the year 2020. We were reading back through it today, and I say you've embodied many of the things that your vision states. Some of the details may be a little bit different. There is no new train depot, unfortunately. But the type of development that you've had and the things the town has done, generally stick with that. The town council also adopted a statement in 2016, is that correct, Bridget? That is a bit shorter than the vision for the future outlined in the comprehensive plan. So there's a couple of competing, maybe not competing, there are a couple of complementary things on the books right now, but for the comprehensive plan, maybe drawing on elements of those as well as elements of the input that we've received from you, from the residents, from the stakeholders we've interviewed, from everybody we've interacted with, from the people that filled out the survey. So this vision statement will become part of the plan is supposed to convey the town's hopes for the future, guide the decision-making process, and align it with a declared set of values and governing principles, and really provide a roadmap, high-level roadmap for where the town wants to be within a certain time frame. So the last one was to 2020. This could be another 20 years down the road in the future. That's what we were talking about when we were asking people about their vision for Jamestown in the community conversation. We said, today's 2020 now, what do you see 20 years in the future? So to get there, we would like for you to complete a little exercise before our next meeting. Again, we haven't set the date. We would give you at least a couple weeks to do this, because then we would need about a week or so of our time to gather all this information back and synthesize it. So we would like for each of you to compose a vision statement. It can be drawn from any number of sources. You have this most recent information, you have the information from the stakeholder sessions that we did, you have the survey results, you have what you've learned through these meetings, and your own experiences living in Jamestown and being members of the community. We will provide an example or two that our version of it, maybe based on some of the input that we've received just from our experience writing similar types of statements. But we don't want you to say that's a good one, go with that. We want you to come up with your own. Feel free to steal what you want from it, but we'd like to see a unique vision from each of you. And you may all come back with the same thing, but don't use ours. And so, at least a week before we set the meeting, the date that we set for the meeting, we will, get all that back together and synthesize it, identify common elements between them, and boil that down to at least one, probably 2 or 3 statements for you to review and discuss at your next meeting. One of the things that what you'll see in our vision statements that we give you as examples, they will not be a long paragraph, they will not be a page, such as is in your current comprehensive plan. It will be a more concise expression of values and principles. One of the, you need to be able to repeat it off the top of your head. When somebody asks you what's Jamestown's vision for the future, you don't need to pull out a index card with it written in tiny print to be able to tell them what your vision for the future is. You need to be able to say it in 2 or 3 sentences at most, probably, to be effective. And with that in mind, that's your assignment for next time. Does anybody have questions about your assignment? We will be sending out a PDF that Bridget and Jason have been working on shortly with that information on it. We'll work with Matthew to identify a meeting date, and that will impact the timelines for everything. But does anybody have any questions about doing that? Excited to have some homework for the first time, maybe in a while. Carl says yes. I see his thumbs up. It's okay. questions on that? All right. And so just to remind you, this, we have all these great things and reinforce, we have all these great things to draw on as you look at this. So look back at the PowerPoints from our meetings, look back at the videos we did, the survey results, and use that information and what you know of your community to develop those vision statements. And we'll repeat that in our instructions back to you. And so that is all that we had for today. I'll turn it back over to Matthew unless somebody else has something that they would like to share.
Anybody else have anything they want to add? All right. Well, thank you very much, Vaughn, and all the folks at Benchmark. So we'll be in touch. We'll send that information out to you guys, and we'll figure out another date here in the not too distant future, and we'll go from there. And
we will be working on developing everything for that walking tour as well. Similar stuff you saw last time, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more lead time this time around to get all that out, since we're able to get it decided on a little bit sooner this time. And we look forward to doing it.
All right. Well, everybody have a good evening.
Thank you.
Cool.